Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Welcome. I cannot believe that this is the 11th panel of our gender data gap in the startup ecosystem. So welcome everybody. Today we are going to be discussing women and IP, and it's about time that we've had this conversation. And we are going to continue to have this conversation and pull it out into all sorts of aspects of the startup ecosystem. I just want to talk a little bit about where I'm actually standing, give tribute to the lands that I'm on. So I'm actually in Collingwood. Collingwood resides within the territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas, the Nawash, the unceded First Nation, Saugeen First Nation, and is home to the Indigenous people, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe. Welcome, everybody. And I don't mean to say that the conversation is just starting now, because it has been one of those conversations that we've been having for a while. And I know that there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of actually even fear. And a lot of times we, as female founders, kind of get bowled over into things a little bit. So this is really one of those panels that are going to help to explore what that lens is looking like. And we have some amazing panelists with us here today. We have Shelley Jones, Sarah Wright, and Elizabeth Dishend. So I would like to start with Elizabeth, with you. Can you please give us a little bit of an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, happy to do so, Cindy. Thanks so much. So my name is Elizabeth Dipchand. I am an intellectual property lawyer in Toronto. My shop's on Bay Street, and it is my shop. And so it's really interesting to see what the entrepreneurial journey has been for me, because it's not something that I did on purpose. And that's really an interesting kind of learning as my journey kind of has went through. I am the fifth daughter of immigrants. My mom and dad came from Guyana, and to say that school was important is a bit of an understatement. And so our background's East Indian, and one of the really interesting pieces about growing up in a household, immigrant household of Indian descent, is that being a doctor was pretty much an expectation. It was just, thou shalt go to medical school and move forward. So when I told my mother, and I broke it to her, that I actually, in fact, didn't want to go to medical school, despite my genetics and biochemistry background, that I, in fact, wanted to go to law school. It was like I had announced a vast and terrible event is occurring in our family. But at that point, I already had two sisters who were physicians. So I said, you know what, you have enough. I need to do what I need to do. You got two of them. You got a pharmacist and an engineer in there as well. At the very least, let me be a lawyer. So it was great, because for me, what law school represented was a meld of everything that I loved, because I love the sciences. There's no question about that. And so being entrenched in the love of STEM and marrying that to law was pretty much the purpose from the get-go. What was not the purpose from the get-go was, at some point down the road, opening up my own shop and being a business owner. There's a big difference between the practice of law and the business of law, and it's a huge piece to really wrap your head around, because a lot of lawyers don't do that. What that's given me a full appreciation of is what business owners go through. And more importantly, what business owners, through my own lived experience as a woman and someone, a visible minority from a marginalized community, is real. The impacts are different. The impacts are material, and not necessarily acknowledged in the way that I think is now being acknowledged. And that really, the catalyst for that was the killing of Mr. Floyd, and all of us being in a shared experience of shared crisis like the pandemic, with the opportunity and the space to reflect on how the differences are there, but more importantly, how inclusivity is a better theme to go about it. So I'm very grateful for this chat, Cindy, because it touches on so many things.
And I think we're going to see a little bit of a theme here, I'm going to have Shelley talk about it in a second, but the STEM, and I'm going to just ask that we add A in, because science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, it just has that wonderful side of it as well. Shelley, tell us a little bit about yourself too, please.
Sure, and thank you so much, Cindy, for including me in this panel. I'm so looking forward to this discussion. And I'm also a lawyer and a registered trademark agent. And in the past, I've worked in private practice and in-house in the intellectual property area. One thing, of course, as a lawyer, I'm going to say any information provided in this webinar should not be considered legal advice. That's my disclaimer. But when I was in-house counsel, I really enjoyed doing seminars for marketing and other business partners on intellectual property. And there was really a lot of interest in the area. And then over the course of my career, I recognized the need for more intellectual property awareness and education in Canada. So that led me to work in this area in the not-for-profit sphere. And then more recently, I've been doing some consulting work, and I'm currently involved in a really interesting equity, diversity, and inclusion project with the Intellectual Property Institute of Canada, or IPIC, which is Canada's IP professional association. And so with federal funding received from Women and Gender Equality and Youth under their Feminist Response and Recovery Fund that was announced in 2021, we're really excited to be part of this, this EDI and the many initiatives that we have planned. So what I find in talking to my friends and colleagues in IP is all of us find our way into this profession in sometimes sort of circuitous routes. And so I love Elizabeth's story. And so I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. And thanks very much again for including me.
Oh, it's wonderful. And Sarah, you're joining us from a different continent altogether. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you, Cindy. Real pleasure to be here with you today. So my name is Sarah Wright. I'm an English solicitor practicing in London, and I'm also a European trademark attorney. So that's dealing with European community trademarks, and we do that through our many offices in Europe, including our hub in Warsaw in Poland. I guess the area of women and IP, and in particular supporting startups, is very close to my heart. It's something that our particular firm, so I work for CMS, we have effectively a virtual accelerator which specializes in supporting technology startups, and that's been running since 2016. We've got a rolling 3-year program, and at the moment we have over 100 startups on that program, and we support them basically kind of pre-seed through Series A, Series B, and onwards. Many of them, I'm pleased to say, continue to progress, are sold, and then some of those entrepreneurs come back with their next great idea, which is fantastic to see. And I founded that startup program and accelerator with one of my colleagues who's a corporate lawyer, because getting the right corporate advice on the funding side and the right IP advice in those early stages are kind of the two critical elements to the success of any new startup. So yeah, really a huge pleasure to be with you today.
There's such an infusion into the startup ecosystem from so many different levels that I'm already hearing. And I want to know, we talk about superheroes and we talk about their origin stories. And I believe that entrepreneurs, because ultimately they are what are driving the economy and driving change. So I'd like to know from your story, what is your origin story? And Elizabeth, you actually gave us a little bit of a tidbit into that, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about what that origin story sounds like.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. So I started off practice on Bay Street. So I was at a very big shop, and then the nation's top ranked litigation firm. And so I did a fair amount of pharmaceutical patent litigation. I love intellectual property so much. And I'm so grateful that I get to do this on a regular basis. One of the challenges that I faced about 10 years out, a little less than 10 years out, probably about 8 years, I hit a 2-week block where I dumped the guy I was dating, got into graduate school, left my job, bought a new car because I never knew when I was going to be employed again, and opened my shop. And it was such an interesting piece for me because I was unhappy, I was unhealthy, I really quite disliked what I was doing at the time. And when you don't like what you're doing, you're not doing it well. You're never going to do it well. So my origin story was kind of, I'm a bit of an accidental entrepreneur. and I backed into it in a very different kind of way. And so when I opened my shop, it was a very, very small situation. I had a client who said, well, you can go through whatever midlife crisis you're going through, but you're going to be our lawyer. And that one client, two client became four clients, became more and more. And as time kind of progressed, I realized, wait a second, people are coming to me because they know me. They're not necessarily coming to me because I was at a specific shop. And as I was coming out of my graduate work, I had chats with people, and I realized, I'm like, this firm, you don't necessarily want me, you want my book. And I always thought to myself, well, I'm not a salesperson. And I had a really, really great person virtually slap me upside the head and said, listen, do you like relationships? And I said, I love relationships. Relationships are everything. And so that's what sales is. And you're not going to sell because that's not who you are. What you are going to do is solve problems. And that's definitely who I am. So in terms of kind of the way that our shop has evolved is very similar to a lot of our clients. They identified an issue. They wanted to follow a passion. They wanted to follow down down a road less traveled, and realized, so wait a second, just because there's someone else who's been doing it for so long doesn't mean that they're doing it the best way, or they're doing it in the way that is ascribes to what their root value system is. And so being able to kind of go through that journey, it's funny to hear when you're chatting with the clients. Well, I don't know if you understand this. I'm like, I'm a small business. I completely get that. I understand because I'm a business owner too. Being able to relate with clients on that level is everything. Is absolutely everything. So that's a little bit about me. And one of the really cool parts about being an intellectual property lawyer in Canada is communities like IPIC. So I like Shelley, I sit as a director with IPIC, but even beyond the board of directors, it's also the community and the entrenchment, because ultimately what you want to do is find a community that will support initiatives like women-owned, women-led businesses. And that's been pretty cool.
And I love how that origin story kind of merged into almost like I don't want to say coming of age, but something like that, because it really had that aha moment in your journey. Thank you. And Shelley, for yourself, what does your origin story look like?
Well, actually, my first introduction to the intellectual property field was when I was a law clerk. I worked in the litigation sector and ended up working with an IP firm here in Ottawa on a telecommunications patent infringement case. So that was my first introduction to the world of IP. And I really enjoyed the work and decided I would become a registered trademark agent. So in Canada, as a non-lawyer, you can become a registered patent agent or a registered trademark agent. You have to sit some exams, and there is a period of study. And I loved the work. So I became a registered trademark agent. And it was actually through my involvement with IPIC on a committee to do with the internet. And at the time, this was when domain names and cyber squatting and internet brand infringement and brand enforcement issues were really coming to the fore. And so through that involvement with the committee, it was just a wonderful opportunity to connect with other practitioners who were really interested in that area. And so I got involved in some other organizations, which then led me to decide to go to law school. So I went to law school after that. And in my final semester of law school, I ended up doing an internship with Yahoo in California. And I was fortunate enough to work with an amazing IP lawyer who is certainly one of the leading experts in the areas of domain name and these cyber squatting issues. So it was a wonderful experience. And then I worked in-house as in-house counsel for a technology firm for several years, and really enjoyed that. It was quite different from my private practice experience. And you develop relationships during your whole journey in this field, and I really loved it. And then found myself sort of going down that intellectual property education and awareness field. And I think that there's just so much work to be done, whether it be starting even as early as elementary school through, like you talked as well about the importance of STEAM education and inspiring students to pursue those careers. So that was really an area of interest for me, which then has now led me to the equity, diversity, and inclusion piece, which really dovetails with all of the work that I've done. So it's interesting how the universe unfolds sometimes, and I'm just really fortunate to have had these opportunities.
And I'm kind of loving how there's this large part of relationships and network that are kind of infused in this make a difference type of field, I guess. And Sarah, from your perspective, what is your origin story?
I guess I'm one of those rare people who always wanted to be a lawyer. I don't know what that says about me, but maybe it was too much LA law when I was growing up. I definitely loved the suits and, you know, the shoulder pads. That was definitely a thing. But then I went off. So in the UK, you can either do law at university or you can do another subject and then convert. I chose to do law because that was my thing. And then I was fortunate enough to get a training contract, which is a bit like when you're article, you're learning the ropes, and you do 2 years in a big law firm and you move around and try different areas of the law. And as I was embarking on my training contract, my then boyfriend, now husband, was just doing his master's at the Royal College of Art. So he's a product designer. He's an artistic, creative type. And he came up with a fantastic new product and was really excited about it. And he was thinking about launching this new business with this new design. And of course, the inevitable happened. Someone copied it. And, you know, he was like, you know, furious and raging and threatening to, you know, come to blows with this particular defendant. And I was like, there might be a different way of handling this. And so I then looked into intellectual property, and it really piqued my interest in so many different areas because it touches on, you know, yes, obviously, you know, protecting creativity and technology and innovation, but there are also aspects which touch on competition law. There's aspects that touch on licensing and, you know, how you interact and how you monetize it. And it's just got so many different aspects to it that, you know, I was sold. That was it. So I did my last seat in the intellectual property department, and that was me hooked. And then I guess, you know, so that was for a very large law firm, huge beast. And I was there for a number of years, and I made some great contacts and colleagues, and I learned a lot. But I got to the stage where actually I was wanting to be more in charge of my own destiny and being able to actually steer where my career went. And it's very difficult to do that in those very large law firms. And so I chose at that stage to move to a smaller law firm where IP was really important to the firm and its clients. And I went somewhere that was a boutique TMT law firm. And I joined them just as kind of the .com you know, was taking off, and got involved in working for some amazing, super interesting clients with some really exciting, you know, executives just at the top of their game, just doing incredible things. And that then kind of got me hooked into helping technology businesses. So that's kind of how I've ended up doing what I do now. But yeah, I just love, I guess part of it is, if you can't be artistic and creative and great at science yourself, at least surround yourself with people who are.
I've never heard of it that way, but what creative journeys that you have all have, and as much as you're saying you might not be creative, just the fluid conversation that you were just having and the way you presented yourself was such a creative way to do it too, and it almost inspiring. It was inspiring, and I do hope that that younger people will actually watch this video, because from each of your stories, there's enough to inspire the youth to be able to follow this path and find that passion. So I just wanted to say that because it really kind of keyed something for me in STEAM. And I'll let you know that my daughters are on either side listening to this as well. So you might be inspiring somebody right now and you don't even know it. I do want to find out when was the first time that you had to consider gender in a business decision? And Elizabeth, we'll start with you.
That's a very interesting question. if for me, it was, I would say, in a material way in terms of my business decisions. I'll come at it from that perspective as opposed to, from a client perspective. I mean, there's always a story. I'm a litigator, so the amount of times that I would walk into a room and be asked for the cup of coffee, things like that. Oh yeah. Or most recently, the most recent one that I thoroughly enjoy is my husband's actually my business partner as well. He's a lawyer. His last name is not Dipchand. And so we were at an event and they said, "Oh, Mr. Dipchand." He said, "No, that my last name is not that. This is my wife, Elizabeth Dipchand." And the fellow who we were speaking with said, "Oh, well, that's very nice. When did your father start the firm?" Oh yeah, that was interesting. So in terms of gender, it comes up quite a lot because when I walk into a room, it is, and you put me next to someone who doesn't look like me, more often, and I'll use the example of the 6 foot tall white dude, but you put me next to my husband who's not quite 6 feet but fits the bill in other respects, and you say, okay, which one of you is the owner of a Bay Street law firm? They're not pointing to me. They're not pointing to me. So in terms of kind of that gender lens, that's something that I deal with and face kind of on a regular basis. And to me, it's not a challenge; it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to be able to show up, and be seen. Because I never got how much that mattered. I never really understood just simply being who I am and being excellent at what I do mattered. And being seen to be doing such things, how much that actually truly does matter. And so in terms of kind of those decisions, it becomes a consideration of responsibility now, right? It's not just about me. It's not just about my business. It's not just about my shop and my people. It's also about showing up for people who look like me, who, quite frankly, and I've heard it a number of times, I didn't know I could do that because I don't see anyone who looks like me who can do it. And you're the first person who looks like me who is doing it, so maybe I can. And that leaves some goosebumps. But I didn't get it, and now that I do, I'm grateful for the weight of the responsibility.
And I think that's really profound. And again, starting in the education system, one of the things that we kind of uncovered, I think it was in this book here, Invisible Women, Data Bias and Women in the World Designed for Men, by Carolyn Criado Perez, is the fact that we're actually left out of history. So how are you supposed to drive your own future if you're left out of history in the classroom? I know my daughters, from their perspective, there really wasn't much for International Women's Day, Women's Week, Women's Month. They're kind of to the point where my one daughter had she had to choose from a scientist for one of her projects to do a paper on, and the choices that were offered to her, none of them were men. So it is poignant, right? Shelley, you have, because you've got such a influence with the invention side of things, I'd love to hear a little bit about when gender first played an issue in a business decision that you had to make.
Well, I think, Elizabeth's comments really resonated with me, and I think as a woman, it's always been there. I mean, I think we throughout our careers find different aspects to in terms of gender and business decisions. But I think considering gender is definitely very important, as is keeping in mind all aspects of intersectionality in business and other decision making. So I think intersectionality is very important. So that means understanding that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression, whether it be, gender, race, sexual orientation, and so on. And in terms of the gender gap and certainly what in the invention sphere, I always think of this Equality of Opportunity project. Now they're known as Opportunity Insights, that was conducted in the US back in 2018. And the title of the project was Who Becomes an Inventor in America? The Importance of Exposure to Innovation. And one of the things that they found is that the current gender gap in innovation would shrink by half if girls were exposed to female inventors to the same degree that boys are to male inventors in their childhood. And that report really struck a chord. And it also showed that, something like 82% of 40-year-old inventors were men. And while the gender gap is gradually being reduced over time, the study concluded that it would take something like another 118 years to reach gender parity. So there's a lot of work to be done in sort of every decision that we make in looking at these issues, again, from the intersectionality perspective.
And we are the ones that are starting to make that change now. And through this conference, through this summit, through this panel here, we will be affecting change. At the end of each one of these panels, we are walking away with change. Sarah, when was the first time you considered gender in a business decision?
It's the first time it really affected me personally was at the stage when I was applying for my first job in law. And I was lucky enough that I went to a girls' grammar school. I know that in the US and Canada, you don't have single-sex schools as much as we kind of do in the UK. But I went to an all-girls grammar school. And I was lucky in the sense that it was founded by the Pankhurst sisters. So it had a very strong feminist vibe throughout the entire school. You were very much taught you can be whatever you want to be. Your world's your oyster. Just go out and get it. And so I hadn't even, the fact that my sex would be a barrier to me achieving anything was just not there when I was growing up at all. And I had, great supportive parents, big brother, just why would that be a problem? And I went off to university and I started thinking about applying for these law jobs and started hearing about people saying, well, if you are lucky enough to get an interview with one of these big law firms, you might want to think about what you wear. And I was like, what do you mean? Surely I should go wearing something that's comfortable so I can concentrate on the questions and give the right answers. But then one of my very good friends managed to get one of these like highly competitive interviews. And she turned up wearing a trouser suit because that's what she was comfortable wearing. And the first question she got asked was, do you think that was an appropriate thing to wear to this interview?
Oh my.
To which her answer was, well, no, if you're asking me that question, you're now questioning whether I've applied to the right firm for me.
Good response.
Enough to say that she did not go there to that firm, but that was the first time I'd really felt that difference and that distinction. Anyway, fast forward a few years, I've got my training contract under my belt. I've moved from the really big law firm to the kind of more boutique firm, and people are starting to talk to me about future careers, what are your plans, and without asking, they're kind of skirting around the topic of, you're married, you've been married a few years now, have you got plans to have a family, those kind of questions. And I'm like, how is this relevant to the conversation? So they were starting to, I think, fortunately, again, I had some fantastic supporters and champions within my department who were not asking me those questions, who were like, of course, Sarah, you can do it whenever you like. It's up to you. You tell us when you're ready to do it and off you go. So it didn't affect me personally, but I heard it from other areas. And I think one of the things that actually we have to be honest about is also we have to tackle women's own perceptions and blockages that we put in our way. My mum was at home for me when I got home from school. My mum was the one who was there cooking the dinners and supporting me and looking after me and my brother. That was the reality. But, she grew up in a different time where she was not able to go to university because that was not available. That was not an option for her. She absolutely was capable of it, but it just was not available for her as an option. So when I started having children, I had to really get my head around the fact that maybe it wouldn't be me putting the dinner on the table, and maybe it wouldn't be me preparing the bag for school. And maybe that was okay. Maybe, I didn't have to beat myself up about that. The fact that I was, getting an extra person to help, or my husband was doing it, or, somebody else in the family or a family friend or whatever. Like you build your own network of people who help you kind of manage these things. but I don't have to beat myself up that it's not me doing it just because it was my mum who did it for me. And I think half the time it is women ourselves who put the brakes on and suppress, and is that inner voice telling you can't do this because of what we perceive society expects us to do. And actually we need to just say, no, I'm not going to listen to those voices. I'm going to think about what I want to do and what I want to pursue and find my own way of doing it, and have honest conversations with your partner about it. I've got a girl in my team who's fantastic, and she was coming up through the ranks, and we're having her appraisal one day, and she's like, well, of course, I don't want to push too much because I've just got married and I want to have kids, and then I might want to go part-time. And I'm like, why? You love your job, you're really well paid. Why should it be you that would go part-time? Have you had that conversation? What does your husband do? Does he like his job? What's his view of this? She's like, well, we've never really talked about it. And I'm like, maybe you should.
And it's time to have those conversations, right? Everything
Absolutely.
should be a partnership. And we talk about these networks and this community, and it's about building that community to raise a family, right? A community to raise a
Absolutely.
business, the same idea. And there was one aha moment from another panel where Edith, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting her last name, drawing a blank. Teresa will type it in. Lovato, there we go. She actually said, one of the things we should all be doing is take our belief system, and put it out to us and just make it all assumptions. So everything we believe, put it out in front of ourselves as assumptions, because it gives us a very different view of what that system is. And I'm also going to be sharing these questions as well. Very interesting study done by Jacqueline Kennedy about how female founders are asked preventative questions when they're doing their pitches by investors. And it doesn't matter whether the investor is male or female, they still get those preventative questions. And as an example of what that might be, oh my gosh, you're coming into a very saturated market. You have this competitor and this competitor and this competitor. How are you ever going to compete? And then changing that around into a promotional response. Right? So taking stock of your skills, taking stock of what you're doing, taking stock of everything. Are you asking about my go-to-market strategy? You have two responses there. It's not open-ended. It's nice closed. If they say no, they're not for you anyways. If they say yes, you've just taken over that narrative. And as much as that might work wonders in the startup environment in front of the investors, it also works in our day-to-day life for everything else we do. If we take this stance of woe is me, we're going to end up someplace very different. So moving it out into that promotional, take stock of your skills. One of the other panels that we had talked about being on a startup board or an advisor board. And that other component that comes to it is taking stock of your skills and moving forward from there. And of course, Sarah kind of alluded to the imposter syndrome. So move away from the imposter syndrome. If you can take stock of your skills, then you're going to realize your value. So when you come across this, oh, I'm not good enough, you can go, but wait a second, I have all these. And I wanted to give that little bit of a story right there, because I want to move more into women in IP side of things. But I'd like to approach it from our unique lenses. We are all looking at it very differently. And I'm very much seeing how there is that synergy between the three of you, but I can also see that we're all looking at it from a different lens. What part of the lens are we missing from your perspective? And Elizabeth, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Cindy. I wanted to pick up on one thing that you said, because I love this kind of idea of what's that, of the mindset. So the great philosopher Mindy Kaling, she's the one who said this, and is very hilarious because she completely encapsulated the mindset of my upbringing, which was I was brought up with the confidence of a 6 foot tall white man, blonde white man with all his hair. right? And so that, setting that stage, just what Sarah was saying in terms of her experience in her girls prep school. The assumption is that you're awesome. The assumption is that you can do anything that you want to do, and it really does tie into what's missing. What's missing is we're going challenge first, not opportunity first. It's a mindset. It's a mindset shift. And one of the things that I'm really grateful for in kind of in legal education, and I'm curious to see how vigorous the nods would be with this one, but as a litigator, setting this, being the one who directs the narrative, being the one to tell the story, regardless of what question you get asked, always turn it in a way to talk about the things that you want to talk about in the way in which you want to talk about them. So that mindset shift, if you think about it from the mindset first, and you are the one who gets to determine what your mindset is. You don't have to pick up on the stuff around you, if you're able to use that mindset to cut through the noise. So that's what I think is missing, and I think that's something that it's too subtle. So when you talk about it and you point it out, that's when it becomes really important to move forward with.
Owning the narrative. I love that. and as opposed to that negative side of taking a look at it from the challenge first, changing that round and owning your narrative. Shelley, from your perspective, what part of the lens are we missing?
Well, I think one of the things that's really important to consider are role models, as is mentoring. So I think in terms of recruiting and encouraging role models is really key. And when you look at female role models in the STEAM fields, I mean, that's another area that's so important. And there was a Microsoft study done back in 2017, and it found that one of the reasons why girls sometimes choose not to follow a career in STEM was because they lack that female role model. And so because women have been historically underrepresented in the STEAM fields, and while we are seeing some improvements, there's still work to be done. In terms of the mindset and opportunity piece, one of the things that I think is really important is to find those opportunities as a senior practitioner like us. If we have an opportunity to chat with someone who might be considering a career in intellectual property, or someone's looking for some mentoring, it's a great opportunity to give back. And I had the benefit of some amazing mentors throughout my career. The other thing is, again, being involved in professional associations. So the Intellectual Property Institute of Canada has its Women in IP, or WING, section. And then there's also mentoring opportunities through associations like IPIC. So I think that's the role model piece. And if you can see yourself in one of these successful women, then I think it not only inspires future generations to go down this route, but it also, I think, is a great opportunity for those of us to give back where we can.
Thank you. And Sarah, from your perspective, what part of the lens are we missing?
Oh, I think, I think one of the ways to look at it, which we haven't talked about, is from the business perspective. Okay, this isn't just the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do. It's also the right business decision. And the reason it's the right business decision is the opportunity cost. If you look at it, in the context of talent, if you look at it in the context of, missing out on phenomenal inventors, scientists coming up and sharing with us their brilliant ideas and turning those into phenomenal things that will disrupt our lives, make them better, improve things for everybody. But also when you're looking at it from startup perspective and you're looking at VCs, the opportunity cost for them, if they are not focused on supporting female founders, is huge. It's absolutely huge. People say, oh, well, there aren't enough female founders out there within the technology sphere. It's just not true. They're there. You've just got to look for them, and you've got to look in the right places. And you have to not go out of your area. Don't go through your normal old boys network, because you're not going to find them there. Hell no. That's not where they're going to be. you need to look through different avenues and you need to ask different questions, but they are absolutely there. There is no lack of female talent. It's about focusing, number one, on making a commitment to go and find it, and then being able to open your recruitment procedures, your questioning, your due diligence to a way in which women will feel comfortable and will thrive and will be able to, demonstrate their worth. And in an IP context, I'm delighted that within our team, we've got 6 patent attorney partners, 5 of them are women. And the reason that's the case is because we have a very flexible policy. You can be a part-time partner if you want to be. You do not have to be full-time. And we are very encouraging and empowering. And we want the best talent. And if you are saying, that has to be a 5-day-a-week job, and you have to be in the office till ridiculous o'clock, and you have to show up to drinks at such and such a time, all you're doing is limiting the types of people who are going to apply to those jobs. So you've got to think about it from a different perspective, and you have to think about, I want to be able to maximize my ability to get the best talent through the door. And in order to do that, you have to go about the process differently.
Indeed. And that's it. We can't follow a stereotype. One of the other books that I read recently is called by Sarah Lacey. And it's The Uterus is a Feature, Not a Bug, which I love the title of that. And it talks about not changing who you are to be part of the bro culture, to be one of the guys, because it's easier to fight a battle from who you are than fight a battle from who other people expect you to be. And that was another thing that I was inspired to think about that way from my daughter's perspective, who was on one of the Young Entrepreneurs panel. And I love this new lens that's forming around. And I'd like to be able to use that new lens that we're just kind of focusing on now to figure out how to encourage women entrepreneurs right now to seek out the help, to know when they need to seek out the help for protecting their companies, protecting their ideas. What does that path look like, and how can we make them feel supported in that journey? Because we know that imposter syndrome plays a very, very crucial part in letting women ask for that. And there's a lot of situations where we'll see a co-founder or even just a C-level come along, and they're actually written up on the IP when they had nothing to do with it. So with all of these kind of components, how do we make women, I don't want to say feel safe, but I almost want to. How do we make them feel empowered to be able to go after this IP and own it for themselves? Elizabeth, we'll start with you.
Yeah, you know what, you got the right word. It's empowered. How do you make them feel empowered? And empowerment is the route to empowerment is education. It's always education. And so from my perspective, one of the really interesting organizations that I'd previously been involved with really tackled that education gap for female founders, which was the Big Push, and Sharon Zohar was the founder of that. And the Big Push isn't operating in the same way that it used to before, but the underlying perspective there was to provide, instead of a VC scenario, but provide an equity for services model where the support is in the experience. The support is in not just come on in and we'll do it for you. It's come on in and let's teach you the importance and the underlying reasons why you need support in certain areas. Law was one of them, but marketing, product development, and manufacturing support, manufacturing management support, financials. Right? I'm always shocked at the amount of times where people are afraid to ask questions because they don't want to look stupid. So creating that space to say, hey, and that one is definitely a safe space to have a trusted advisor and a group of trusted advisors to be able to do that. So how do you do that? That's community, that's relationships, that's the network that you were talking about. And that network cannot be an insular one. It has to be an outward facing, large, underpinned by the values that everyone is attempting to espouse and develop, but not just women helping women, because there's a whole lot of dudes out there who really, really want to be a part of change as well. And so it's going to be a really important piece to be inclusive in all sort of support frameworks, but that education piece is everything.
And I think that I just want to kind of give one of the links. I think is Osgood Hall, and there's a couple of support links that founders can go to reach any of you, as well as to some more information that we'll share in the afternotes as well. Shelley, from your perspective.
Well, I completely agree with Elizabeth that education is so important. And when it comes to intellectual property, because it's not typically a subject that's covered in curriculum. I mean, we do have some post-secondary programs at the university level in Canada that are trying to sort of move the needle there. But I do think it's really important from an empowerment perspective to do that type of outreach. And that's something that, and again, at a grassroots level, finding those female founders, like Sarah had mentioned, in places that, whether it be small business groups or, local community organizations, there's a lot of opportunities to do that type of outreach and do it in such a way that makes intellectual property accessible, because it is a very technical area of the law. There's a lot of challenges there, but I think it can be their information can be provided in such a way that can help small business owners. Just as an example, every small business is going to have some bundle of intellectual property rights. There's going to be something there that is certainly worth protecting. And when you're looking at getting an investment and talking to potential investors, being able to feel empowered and knowledgeable about what rights you have and what you've protected is so important. And so that's why I think sort of doing that outreach and education, doing whether it be seminars or webinars, and hopefully we'll be able to be doing these things in person again soon. And I think it's a great way to connect. And then, as I said, empower business owners to go forth and use those IP rights, whether it be, again, for investing purposes or, creating a revenue stream through licensing. There's all these opportunities, but we want to be able to see, or I think it's something that would be really helpful if it was accessible.
And Sarah, from your perspective, what does that look like?
I mean, I would echo everything that Elizabeth and Shelley has said. Education is obviously key, and I think actually particularly in relation to IP rights is sadly lacking. I mean, particularly if you look at the creative industries where, what you're making are IP rights. It really should be a fundamental part of any, fine art, design, fashion, any of those types of disciplines. IP should be a mandatory part of their education, and sadly it just isn't. And so I've been involved in a number of programs around that to try and get that message out. And we're fortunate in the UK that the two institutes, the Chartered Institute of Trademark Attorneys and the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys, offer some fantastic pro bono clinics for people who want to access that kind of advice. But picking up on what Elizabeth said, obviously IP is part of it, but in every area, if you're a new business owner and you're a startup, I think you just, don't be frightened to ask questions. Don't be frightened for help, because I think, if you ask 10 people to help, I'd be surprised if you don't get 10 people willing to give you half an hour over a coffee to talk to you about it. Everybody wants to help. Particularly if you go to someone who's already got their own business, they'll remember what they were like when they were starting out, and they will give you that time. And I think sometimes men are better at doing that than women, and we just need to just have the confidence that we can go and ask those questions. And if you're terrified of doing it, maybe get someone to introduce you, or get someone to kind of recommend someone you can go and speak to. And once you've done it once, it's like anything, the more you do it, the better you get. And also, if you speak to one person who helps you, ask them to recommend someone else who could help, and then they do the asking for you. You don't even have to do it. And certainly when I became a partner and effectively a business owner myself. And I was trying to figure out, what's my particular sales pitch going to be? What's my area? How am I going to do that? My mentor was like, Sarah, you just need to get out and talk to people, and you will start seeing where the opportunities lie. They will give you those ideas. You have to get out there and talk to people. And it was such a pleasant surprise, and it kind of reinforces your faith in humanity and, business community, that actually people aren't trying to trip you up. People are genuinely out there to help. And I think, as I said before, you're actually doing them a favor as well. You're bringing them a business opportunity. You're not going cap in hand. You've got a great business and you're wanting to go and talk to them about it. And it might not be of interest to them, but they might be interested to someone else they know, or to a colleague or an associate, or they might come up with another way of looking at it. So I think you've really got to put yourself out there. And if you do that, you'll be surprised at what opportunities arise.
I think that's it's so much easier said than done, though, isn't it? Because there's the fear to talk to lawyers that even one question costs you. So there's the dollar sign that people think of right away. So from all of you, what questions should they be asking?
I would say just be open and frank and say, right at the beginning, I'm a small business owner. I don't have a huge budget. Can I have a first meeting free of charge? And so you can go, we do it. Most law firms in the UK will give you an hour free of charge when you're a new client. So go have that first meeting free of charge. You'll then understand in broad terms, what are the big issues? What are the things you really need to think about? And then just be really honest and say, right, what are the rates? Because the last thing you want is a surprise. You don't want it. They don't want it. They don't want to waste their time having an argument with you 3 months down the line about, oh, I thought it was X price or Y price or whatever. Just be really upfront about it and say, I've got a budget of X. Can you do me the work for that? And you know what? They might have a junior associate who sat around twiddling their thumbs, and absolutely you'll be able to get that advice for the price. If you don't ask, you don't get.
Fair enough. And is there that set of questions that every entrepreneur should be asking?
Well, I'll be honest. Let me jump in there, because what I find absolutely hilarious is, Sarah, I really like I shorten it into no asking, no giving. That is a rule. No asking, no giving. If you're not going to ask, then you're not going to get it. And in terms of those questions, what I always find interesting is when new clients come in the door, they're coming in for this one little thing. They're like, this is the thing that I need. And I said, okay, that's cool. I'm here. Tell me about your business. Tell me about what you're doing. Tell me about your life. Tell me about how you're operating in the world. And as you listen, because all of us on the call have been doing this for a long time, you're like, okay, well, this is what you came in for. This is what you need. And in fact, this thing that you came in for, you don't actually need it. And so that is the real question isn't what's the list of questions. The real question is, what's the attitude when you're coming into it? Are you coming into this with a mindset of this is going to be your trusted advisor? Are you looking for a partner, or are you looking for just a one-off service provider? We don't do one-offs in our shop, because I don't get my joy from that. I get my joy from being able to, and let's be clear, that is the priority here. Fulfilling my joy is critical to our shop, because whatever makes me happy, I'm going to be really good at that. Yeah. And if I can, it makes me happy to build those relationships and be a part of the success of a venture. And so if you're looking for a one-off, there are people who will do that. There are plenty of people on the street. That's no issue. But it's the mindset of an entrepreneur coming in thinking, okay, wait a second, I need a partner for life, or until this company is sold. That's the question, not the list, because quite frankly, they're not equipped to actually come up with the list. Yeah. We're the ones with the list, and we will tease that out after we get to know you and we get to know the business. So I'd say scrap the list.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's an important element, because the number one thing that Teresa and I have heard, for a very long time, is that female CEOs feel alone, right? Even when they have that co-founder, there's that feeling of being alone. So understanding that when they're approaching this subject, that when they're looking for somebody that will actually be a partner as part of their journey, it might actually be a relief to think about it that way. And Shelley, from your perspective, what's the list, or what's the question?
I'm in complete agreement with Elizabeth. I think what happens is somebody may have a specific issue that they want to talk about, but then when you're talking about intellectual property, one of the first things you need to do is identify what scope of IP rights you might actually have. And that's where talking to somebody who has the intellectual property expertise can help, because, and as Elizabeth said, it's really important to look at it as a partnership, as a trusted advisor, because what you're able to do then in talking to clients is to say, look, there may be some things that you need to focus on that are even more of a priority than what you may have walked in the door with, including, for example, not only sort of acquiring and obtaining those IP rights, but thinking about things from a business perspective in terms of what's your budget for enforcing those rights if you have to enforce them. Do you have the budget for that? Or is this something that you may be looking at some issues down the road? So there's a lot of things to consider, and that's where, like Elizabeth said, it's not always a list per se that's coming through the door. It's once you've had a chance to review kind of the whole scope and learn about the business, it's always really exciting to see someone who's starting off and how, as an IP practitioner, you can help.
And that's part of what you're raising funds for, right? So having that piece in the budget, maybe that's how we approach is, I've just started a business. I'm raising funds. How much do I need to allot for my legal side? And that's where you start that journey with that partner, that new legal partner that you're bringing in. I'm just actually looking at the time. We have 4 minutes left, and I really would like to wrap this up with actionable change that each one of us are going to be leaving this here today with. And I just wanted to bring a few little points to you to the surface again from what we've talked about. We tend to approach things from challenge first, and we need to change that narrative and start with a mindset first. We want to think about our IP and with the legal side, not from one question or one piece at a time, but more as a partnership. This is more of a journey than just a one-stop shop. We also want to make sure that we build in more female role models to all of this. And goodness, I think that's it. I know there's so much more. I would start with you, Elizabeth. What is one action item that you'll be taking away from today?
Well, I think a really important action item to be taken away is that idea of being part of a team on a larger journey is more important, more fun. It's going to be more effective, and it's a better sell to your investors, especially when that investor could potentially also be bringing the smart money, which is being a part of that team moving forward. So being mindful and strategic of that with an opportunity mindset, that's what I'll take forward.
Thank you. And Sarah, what's the one actionable item that you'll be leaving here today with?
So many, it's hard to choose just one, but I guess what I would say is that, I'm very fortunate that as well as working for the startups, I also work for the big companies. And I guess it's using the opportunities when I'm with those bigger companies and with particularly VCs that invest in startups, is to say to them, challenge the way they're going to market and where they're looking for investment. Thank
you. And Shelley, what actionable item will you be leaving here with?
Yeah, there are a lot to choose from, that's for sure. Certainly as part of this Intellectual Property Institute of Canada's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion initiatives, there's lots of different ways to embrace actionable items. And one of the things definitely is increasing intellectual property education and awareness for entrepreneurs and innovators from those traditionally underrepresented groups, and trying to kind of do that sort of outreach, I think will be incredibly important.
Thank you. And I just want to say that this whole summit has been eye-opening to me. I came into this trying to affect change from a very different level, because when startups are starting, that's when they're most malleable. To try to affect change from a corporate level, they need to monetize it right away. To try to affect change from the government level, by the time anything really happens, either very slow or it gets voted out. If we stand strong and proud as women and try to affect change, we've seen how that ends on so many levels. So what we will be doing together, leaving these, from my perspective, is leaving and trying to affect change from when startups are being, by design, so that they are diversely influenced and gender influenced. I leave everybody with this. I want to say thank you to you ladies. I think this was very informative and such a wonderful array of perspective. And I had never thought of it from the creative side. There's so much creativity that goes into what you guys do. And I applaud that and I appreciate that. And it's inspiring. I always leave everybody with this last story. When I was young, my grade school was right around the corner. I ran after my friend, yelling at the top of my lungs, Hilda, 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 Hilda. I got up to her and realized it wasn't her. So I just kept running around the corner, continued to yell, Hilda, 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 until I was out of eye shot. So all you ladies out there, just keep running and waving. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye now.
you.
Thanks so much.